Top-ranking apps harness data to win. It's what informs acquisition campaigns, what allows them to keep tabs on competitors and spot trends, sometimes before everyone else. And the market research haves can plan strategies, level up their capabilities, build a competitive edge. The have-nots risk flying their businesses blind, and we all know where that can end. So how do you dig deep into data about your category, and what are your options? Well, we're going to find out today because my guest has founded a company with a hands-on approach to app market research and intelligence. And it's no surprise because he himself was deep into games development for over a decade. In 2010, he was the chief product officer at Crazy Panda. And in 2015, he started working on AppMagic, the app market intelligence tool that we're going to be discussing in depth today. So I want to welcome CEO, founder of AppMagic, Max Samorukov. Welcome to the Hive.
Hey Peggy, happy to be here.
I love the name of your company too, but we'll get to that in a moment, what that all means. But you started out making games, and today you head an app market intelligence provider. What made you switch?
Actually, I still work as a chief product officer at the Crazy Panda, but also we used to track doing market research. For example, our flagship game was and is a poker game, and it's pretty big. And I needed to follow all our competitors and see who's going where, who's getting market share, who's losing it, and then try to understand why it's happening. So it was a real pain in the neck to figure out, to have a complete list of competitors and see the bigger picture and monitor it constantly. So I started working on a simple tool for myself, and then it grew up to be an AppMagic.
That's always the best way, right? It's the pain point you have. It's what you can't deal with or do in your job. And you say, nope, there has to be a better way. I'll make it myself. I'll make it myself. Now, AppMagic is the tool. And the title itself, just the name, AppMagic, would indicate that this is a little out of the ordinary. What's in that name?
Yes, the word magic in the name stands for focus on building simple tools for answering complex questions. For example, 4 years ago, as I told, there were no way to compare a list of apps on the same graph. Or, for example, sometimes you need to find all the apps that showed the best progress in terms of the specified metric. So what does it mean? Like, what's the best progress from what position to what in what period of time? How to figure it out? And then we try to understand the logic of a professional, say professional producers who checks all the apps on the market and then checks the ones that he considers to be the most interesting in terms of the pace of their growth. So we try to develop a logic that would help you to immediately get a list of the most notable titles. And actually, this tool appeared in the first version of AppMagic, and I still use it a lot, and I still really love it because, for example, if you use the tool for the past year, you immediately see the list of most notable titles of the global market or specified market. It works pretty brilliant.
And we agree that marketing intelligence, it's a must. You can't be in the app space, gaming app, any app, without it. But it's also a crowded market. Where and how are you different?
First, we needed to stand out with unique features, and that's what we started with: an ability to compare apps, an ability to compare several metrics, an ability to find what you need in a really fast way, an ability to solve several complex tasks in a really simple and fast way. So many of our customers value us for the speed and easiness of use. Secondly, definitely many of our bigger competitors are known for the high price tag. So we were much more accessible, much more affordable. But actually, we faced the fact that even if you distribute it for really low price, many people just don't use it because they don't see a real need in doing market research. They mostly rely on their intuition, or they just check top ranking apps, top rankings in, I don't know, just free charts, and that's it. And it takes a lot of effort to explain people why you need more complex way to analyze the market.
Well, that is a great segue because that's exactly what I want to do here. I want to understand from you how I use market intelligence at every stage, because you do need it at every stage. Maybe not every marketer understands that, but you need it. You need it to understand, hey, I've got an idea for a game. Does it have what it takes to be a commercial success? What are the apps out there? What are those games? What does that tell me about the blue oceans, the opportunities? So let's just go, Max, together. Let's start. Let's start at the beginning. How does AppMagic help me make that call?
So how do you figure out if your game idea is good? You need to understand several things about the market. First, if it's a big market, what's the average success rate of new titles? What the average production level of new titles? And is your game idea is actually new? Because sometimes, for example, you see games that performs really well, and you don't see strong competitors of the game, some other similar titles, and you think, okay, maybe that's a good chance. It's a very big game, and I don't see similar games, so I'm gonna be the one who delivers one. And then you start working on it. You come up with game twists, changes in metagame and optimization, but it's still similar. And then you deliver the game and figure out that, I mean, it doesn't earn anything. You cannot purchase traffic with positive ROI, and there is no free traffic actually. So what you could do to prevent it? So one of the most important things is to figure out other different titles that employed the same product idea. And if you only pay attention to the top charts, you cannot answer this question. So in many cases, you need an ability to scout for similar games that didn't become successful. And how you do that? Like 4 or 5 years ago, you had to use store categories, and you go to the top rankings and checks for action games. But there are a lot of different genres that have a tag of action game. You can't get much with just paying attention to store categories. So then we were, as far as I know, we were the first company who implemented manual classification of apps. So every day our classification team, they download a list of top performing apps that hasn't been classified yet, and then they check screenshots, gameplay videos, and mark it with tags of genre, subgenre, setting, and art style. So it gives you an ability to focus on the market segment. For example, find all survival games, or shooter games. But then the next important thing about the classification is the detailing.
There are some marketers telling me, they're saying, well, we're in hyper casual, but we see the opportunities in casual. And we're slowly sort of shifting our model there. So they're going from hyper casual to something like hybrid, but the end game, literally, is to be casual. So as they're shifting, you can see that these categories, they're melding, they're morphing. It's really helpful to have a tool that is going to help me categorize these apps properly to start.
Yeah, that's really important. And actually, what you just told, the melting of genres, brings up an important question: what's next? Okay, we now have genres, but some games are in between of genres, or maybe there's something more important in them. Maybe it's not the presence of a feature, but how it's done. And here comes in handy our next tool that's called similarity graph. So what we do, we just analyze recommendation systems of Google and Apple, thinking that they have enough data about user behavior and they know what to recommend them. So we parse the recommendations, generic recommendations, not personalized ones. And then we build kind of a graph, how games refer each other in their similar apps block. And this tool helps us find very similar games.
First of all, it's just interesting for me as an analyst, for me as someone in the industry to say, okay, now what is really at the core of the competitive edge of a specific game? And you go very deeply into that. But take a step back with me for a moment and do exactly what we said we were going to do at the start. You're saying marketers don't necessarily understand how to do the market intelligence and the research. Help me understand how I would apply this information. I'm a marketer. I have an app. I have a game. I can see into this granularity. How do I use it? How do I apply it? How do I wield it to win?
Sure. Not sure we can provide you with a way to win, but we first primarily we can help you with avoiding costly mistakes first of all, and then in improving your chances to succeed. So what we do, for example, if you are able to focus particular market segments and also learn something about the features, you can understand, for example, what correlates with success. You can see where the genre is moving to. And also you pay attention to what other people do. You can check their new releases. You can not only successful one, but all notable ones, the ones that developed in a fine quality, to try to understand what other developers are thinking about, what they add in their new games, what twists they are thinking about. And that also gives you an understanding of what options are there and what of the options is mostly preferred for you. And then, for example, one of the interesting metrics is the percentage of successful titles. For example, if you take two genres, say solitaire games and runner games, both genres are considered to be not super difficult in terms of production. But in every year, we track about 100 games of each genre to appear. But when it comes to runner games, there are just maybe one or two in a year that becomes successful and remain their level of performance for a solid period of time. And when it comes to solitaire games, each of them is smaller, but it's much bigger percentage of them that manages to become steady in terms of performance. So the chance for you to succeed in the second case is much bigger, but the size of the prize is much smaller. So you are able to choose.
I want to go back to the recommendations. That really sparked my interest, Max, I have to say, because recommendations, understanding the algorithms and what they are going to recommend, that tells me perhaps how I'm going to make it into that, people who downloaded this, downloaded that, or if, that's sort of that correlation, that filtering that's going to get my game in front of potential users. Is that the idea here?
The thing is that we do not control the algorithm of the platform. So we do not necessarily know, we don't clearly know how exactly it works. We just see that if you open the page for this app, these games are also recommended. We think it's about the genre definitely and sometimes settings, but also we think that these may be keywords that are similar in both apps. For example, if I develop a game that's similar to Archero, I implement the same keywords in the ASO of my game, so they become similar in terms of ASO. And maybe that's the games look similar for the Google recommendation system. So we don't know exactly how it works, but in many cases it works amazingly well.
So we talked about all the data that marketers need to know. They need to know their market data. They need to know their market intelligence, but they also have other data they're looking at, metrics like LTV, retention, what they need to power their UA campaigns. Interestingly, people at Reforge love it when they say it. It's so true. It's so painful. Benchmarks can be bogus, or even for that matter, many benchmarks are based on averages, and who wants to be average? So with that in mind, that I'm balancing that with the insights I'm getting from your tool, how do I balance that? How do I get the best results looking at the market, looking at my app?
Good question. So first of all, if you do have access to primary metrics that got directly from the app, it's the best you can get, definitely. But when you are talking about investigating the market, we are talking about apps and the data you don't have access to. So you need to rely on the data of services of our kind. So the number of metrics here is limited. It's definitely revenue and downloads. Then you may want to know ad revenue, but as for now, I don't know. I haven't heard there is a tool that is able to deliver any accurate estimates for ad revenue because of many complex reasons. But what you can measure is LTV. So since we don't have cohorts in services of our kind, because we don't have user level information. We can just understand like total revenue by country divided by total number of downloads, and that's a value that is tending to LTV, but it's actually not LTV, it's lower. And it can be misleading, because in some cases when you see a big number of this kind of LTV, large ratio of total revenue divided by total downloads, you may think that's a brilliant game. They do, I don't know, $10, $20 LTV, let's do a game like this. But then pay attention to amount of downloads or total amount of revenue. And if you see a game with $10 LTV, which has, I don't know, 20,000 downloads monthly, it should stop you, because if they're so good, why can't they buy traffic? So maybe their target audience is pretty narrow. Maybe the CPI or CPM for their target audience is amazingly high, is more than $10. So I usually recommend to pay attention to the final key metrics, such as revenue or downloads, depending on your monetization model.
What are the signs? Because you're watching all these metrics, and it's interesting to hear you explain them, Max, and put them into perspective, because at the end of the day, it's a trade-off, but you've put it really well. You know, there is something that you can bear in price, or, you know, what would seem to be a no-go that actually is a go, if all of it makes sense together. What about UA? There are signs that even though it might be expensive, it actually pays. Can you just give me maybe a little bit of a view into that, a glimpse into that, unpack that? When do I double down even though it might not seem I should?
It's a very interesting and complex topic. The whole industry of user acquisition is very big, but I think I can come up with a couple of topics ideas. First, one interesting thing I've noticed recently was that a couple of new match-3 games became leaders in terms of amount of new traffic in the US market, the primary Western market, and they nearly didn't have any in-app purchases. And it was like, how comes? I mean, the average LTV for, I don't know, games by Players or Candy Crush Saga is like $20 in the US, and these games manage to compete with these guys who pay, say, comparably high price tag for the CPI, and they don't have enough purchases, and they purchase more traffic than Playrix and or Project Makeover. How come? And my idea, I'm not a specialist in user acquisition. My idea is that conventional match-3 games that leverage primarily in-app purchases, they target small amount of audience that usually pay in games and like match-3 games, and the competition for the audience is pretty high, and that's what makes the price tag is same high. But then, say, are these people who pay a lot in match-3 games are only the people who like to play match-3 games? Not. So maybe we need to address broader audience and target people who are not targeted by Playrix or King. And then we can, for example, I'm just thinking about it, we can target a very broad audience that is not pursued by other big companies, and it's kind of blue ocean maybe. Another thing that is, I believe, a trend, it's not actually a new trend, is when platforms restricted using misleading ads, many switch to a new paradigm that works pretty well, I believe. It is when you use the same assets from your game, directly from your game, but you fake the gameplay, not totally. It looks, maybe like if you're doing a farm, it looks kind of like a farm, but the gameplay is different. It's more active, it implies more direct control, it's more funny, but and people like it and click it. So it doesn't look like a totally misleading ad for a platform or ad network, but the gameplay is very different. And I know that this paradigm is being employed by many, not only by games with very high LTV, such as, I don't know, match-3 games or Forex strategies, but also maybe idle tycoons that have average LTV of $2 to $5 in the US, and it's still better for them in many cases, not always, but in many cases, they still employ misleading ads because of simple reason. It helps them get cheaper traffic.
So at the end of the day, you're telling me we need to watch the market data. Let's talk about how to do it, right? What's a proper routine? Who needs to watch it? How often? Give me an idea of like, the way of approaching this to make understanding and digesting market intelligence part of the way things are, part of business as usual.
It really depends on the company and on your product strategy and how many products you have, how often you deliver new products, your approach to analytics and how you actually rely on it. Because many people don't watch what's going on the market more often than once in a quarter. So it really depends. But what I recommend primarily, definitely, you do research when you're thinking about an idea of a new game. Then during the development, you don't stop to do it because you keep on watching what's going on in the market. Because, for example, if it takes you not a month but several months or a year or more to develop a game, the market could change while you're developing it, and there's no much sense in continue developing what you started with. So you need to twist what you do, maybe change something important. And then when you release a game and it works well and it earns money, you still need to research the market even more intensely because you want to understand how you can improve the game, because most of games nowadays are games as a service. So you need to follow what your competitors are doing and what new features they add in the game, and you monitor how the market shares are changing. And if you see a sign that someone started performing better than they used to perform, it's a sign for you to investigate them closer, try to understand what in particular helped them to start growing. Maybe this changed something in how they purchase traffic, their creatives, they added a new feature, added new live ops, added a new monetization approach. Everything is important. So, but you cannot monitor everything. You cannot play every game every day. So you need to use signals from the market. And the signal depends on what you do, on the genre, on the specific of your market segment.
So we need to watch the signals, but we also need sources to learn, right? News, podcasts, places to understand gaming, to understand strategy. What is your pick?
What I do, I follow a lot of different markets because we have a lot of customers and I love to help them. And what I try to do is ask him about what's their biggest challenge in terms of mobile market intelligence. Like not only mobile market intelligence, what they want to do, what they are afraid of, what their concerns, what's their focus, what's their strategy, and then I try to get in their shoes and think like them, like how I could help, like myself, if I were them, like what is possible to do, and then what helps me. What helps me to come up with ideas for new features and new approaches to research the market. So I really love being involved in a lot of different industries, a lot of different genres, and it helps me to understand the global picture better and to dive deep into details about different genres, and it's actually what makes me happy.
Any particular destinations? Any like sort of, you have to listen to this podcast? Ours, of course, Max, of course. But in addition, you have to listen to this other podcasts. You have to be in this Slack group. You have to read this stuff.
I'm present in a number of online communities, and I check what people write. Different communities for about game design, about producing, about marketing, user acquisition. I attend some conferences, read, but I don't read much blogs. I know several that I really love, definitely, such as The Contractual Fund or something, that deliver long reads, which take time to go through, but that delivers a lot of value. That's what I love, because if you want to understand market better, you need to spend time on it. And I mean, it's surprisingly how many times I changed my own opinion on how you research a market, what's good or what's bad, because you constantly evolve in process of doing market research and trying to find new ways. And it's maybe surprising for many people who only think about, I don't know, checking top charts and top performing apps, how much of depth is there in the market research if you spend a lot of time in it and trying to find answers, if you really devote time to it.
And speaking of time, Max, exactly that. Time has run out. Unfortunately, it's been a great talk with you. Learned a lot, and above all, learned to understand what to look at to enter a market, to stay in a market, to compete in a market. Thanks so much for sharing.
Thanks so much for having me.
Stay up to date with our show schedule by signing up for alerts at pollen.vc. That's where you'll also find our suite of financial modeling tools to help you plan and manage your business growth.